Hello, this is Professor Shannon Gracie. Today we're covering section 6.2 from Robert Blitzer's Introductory and Intermediate Algebra for College Students. We will be covering factoring trinomials whose leading coefficient is 1. And so as a warm-up, what we're going to do is take a look at, the products of two binomials, and the only thing, as you may have noticed, the only thing that is different is the sign in the middle. So I wanted you guys to start seeing, what happens when we have the different signs, the results of combining like terms. Is it really an addition or a subtraction, and all that good stuff. So here we go, and we'll do this warm up together because it's actually the start of my lesson here. So here we go, and again, I might be doing this slightly in a strange manner, but I'm going to be using the distributive property twice. Right, like we did when we first learned how to multiply. So here we go. We're going to have x, this x here, times the binomial x plus 8, right? And then we will be having plus 1 times x plus 8. Right? Now, when I distribute the x through, I will get x squared plus 8x. And then when I distribute the 1 through, I will have plus 1x plus 8. Right? So notice what happened when I have all addition signs, when we're combining like terms, right, which are these guys here. When we're combining like terms, we are adding two positives. We're adding two positives. So we get x squared plus 9x's plus 8. And we're done. So let's just keep a little record of what happened. So and actually instead of underlining it in red, I'll highlight it. So when we were combining like terms, what happened was I'll put a little side note. So when combining like terms, we ended up with two positives, or two positive terms. And when you have two positive terms, you end up with a sum. Okay? When you have the same sign, remember you're summing. So we had a sum of two positives. Okay, so now let's take a look at part B. So with part B, we have x times x minus 8, and then minus 1x, right? Because negative 1 times x is minus 1x, and then negative 1 times negative 8 is a positive 8. Oh, you know what? I apologize. I'm getting ahead of myself. I wanted to show you in a certain way. So minus 1 times the quantity, x minus 8. And then in the next step, I will do the distributions. So we get x squared minus 8x's minus 1x and then plus 8. Now, here we go. Again, last time when combining like terms, we had two positive terms, so it was a sum. Here, do you see that we have two negative terms, right? Two negative terms. So again, when combining like terms, we ended up with two negative terms, and that ends up being a sum of two negatives, right? So again, we had two negative terms. When you're combining like terms for two negative terms, you end up with a sum. Now, this is very important because you have to look at the combination of these items. All right, so here we go. Let me give my final result here, which is x squared minus 9x plus 8. Now, what you have to think about is you're going to be starting off with trinomials that we just developed or got from multiplying. So what I'd like you to notice is this important fact. You have a positive in front of that last term. Okay, so the combination, all right, this guy, we had a positive I'll call it end term, right, which was the result of a product, right? So positive end term in both of them, we had a positive end term. What is the way to get a positive end term when you have a product? Positive end term means we had to, in the first case, multiply two positives, right? And here we multiplied two negatives, right? Because a negative times a negative is a positive. So here, when you have a positive end term, okay? So positive end term, you will always end up with a sum of either two positives or two negatives when you're combining like terms. Now let's go over here. Here's a different situation. Okay, this guy we will get x times x minus 8 plus 1 times x minus 8, which yields x squared minus 8x's plus 1x minus 8. Now, when combining like terms, notice we've got opposing signs. So when you have opposing signs, you're subtracting, and the term coefficient that has the largest absolute value wins. So 8 is larger than 1, so we get minus 7x's minus 8. So here we go. This is the information we get from this. All right. When combining like terms, we have opposing signs. I'll just say opposite signs. So that means it's a difference. Okay? So that's the yellow. Now the green says we have a negative end term, which is a negative product. So you have to multiply a positive and a negative to get a negative. All right, so that's where the information from the green is. Okay, and let's look at the last situation. This is x times x plus 8 minus 1 times x plus 8, which gives us x squared plus 8x's minus 1x minus 8. And if you notice, our like terms, again we have a positive and a negative. This time the positive is in front of the 8, so we'll get x squared plus 7x's minus 8. Alright. So really, do you see that in this case we end up with the same situation? So these words apply to both that I had just done for part C. So actually, if you don't mind, I will just copy this down. Actually, do a new one. I'll just copy this guy. Okay. All right. Seems like there's sort of a little ghosty thing going on, but I think you get the right idea. All right, so now hopefully this will help you sort of analyze and understand where we're going from this point forward. Here's a strategy for factoring something in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c using grouping. Now, one thing that you need to understand is that in this case, in this section, the a is always going to be 1. But I like to give you the rule in general so you get used to the fact that you're multiplying a times c in order to break this up into 4 terms so that we can use our factoring by grouping that we learned in 6.1. So here we go. Multiply the leading coefficient, in this case 1, and the constant c. Sometimes it's not a constant. It might be a term like with y or y squared, you know. So you just have to adapt. Find the factors of a times c whose sum is b. So when they say sum, what they mean is the result of combining like terms. So when you combine like terms, your coefficient to that is b. Then you rewrite the middle term b times x as a sum or a difference using the factors you found from the second step, and then you just factor by grouping. Now guys, this is going to take a lot of practice, so please give yourself enough time. Okay, so here we are. Here's an, oh, and by the way, this is the setup for your x, all right? So here you'll have, let me see if I have room to the side. I do. So this is the setup. You'll make an x, okay? And then in this part of the x above is your a times your c. And then you have your b here. And you're looking for the sides. So the sides will be 2 numbers, and again we're just talking coefficients that multiply out to be the total product a times c, and that when you combine like terms you get b. Alright? So, you know, I think that it is, and again this is for ax squared plus bx plus c. And I think that as you see the examples you'll find it a little easier. So here we go. Factor each trinomial. So in this case, a is 1. So we're going to put our x over here. A times c is 1 times 8, which is 8. The b is positive 9. So Now we use our reasoning from before. I have a positive end product. That means that I had to use the combination of having a positive end product and a positive in front of my b means that I have so here the yellow means I added two positives because a positive times a positive is a positive. So the combination of the yellow and green give you your information to make your x. So here we go. To fill it in, what two numbers multiply out to be 8 and sum to be 9? Good. Positive 1 and positive 8. So now what we do is we rewrite this as x squared plus 1x plus 8x plus 8. So we, instead of having 9x, all right, so I'm gonna go ahead and erase these. So instead of writing this 9x, we write plus 1x plus 8x. And then we factor by grouping. We're back to the red group, blue group situation. So do you see that from the red group I can factor out an x and I'm left with an x plus 1. And from the blue group I can factor out an 8 and I'm left with x plus 1. Now if you did it correctly, you will get a common binomial factor. Alright, so again, remember this had been red group and this had been the blue group. And so then at the end of the day, we factor out the x plus 1 and we're left with x plus 8 and we're done. We've factored it. So again, what we did is we factored out our common binomial factor of x plus 1 and used the distributive law. Okay. Next problem's pretty similar. Notice, I'm looking at this positive here in front of the 10 tells me I have the same sign in front of my middle terms. This sign here is a positive, so that means I have two positives. So I need to find two numbers that do what? Multiply to be 1 times 10 is 10 and have a sum or difference of 7. Good, a sum. So what two numbers fit the bill? Good, positive 5 and positive 2. By the way, it doesn't matter how you use it. You could do positive 2, positive 5, and what'll happen is your factors will be commuted, which is fine. So here we go. We break this up into x squared plus 5x plus 2x plus 10. So again, the plus 7x is now plus 5x plus 2x. We've got our red group and our blue group for factoring. So then this gives us x times x plus 5 and then plus 2 times quantity x plus 5. So again, red group and blue group. And this gives us a result of, notice we have a common binomial factor of x plus 5. So we factor that out, x plus 5, and then we have our x plus 2. And this is what was factored out. So that's like my a times my b plus my c in the parentheses. How you doing? At any time, feel free to pause the movie and do these examples on your own. For part C, I'll get you started. Notice that again, this plus sign right here means that to get a product of 40, we ended up with either two positives or two negatives. Well, we have a negative in front of the middle term. So that means that this middle term, the combining like terms was a sum or difference. Good, a sum of two negatives. All right? Okay, so here we go. Here's our x. 1 times 40 is 40. And then b is negative 13. Two numbers that multiply to be 40 and sum to be negative 13 are? Good, negative 8 and negative 5. So we will rewrite our middle term as minus 8x minus 5x plus 40. Okay. So this is how we split up our middle term. And then again, red group and blue group. So factoring an x from the red group, we're left with x minus 8. And then be careful, see how it's a minus? If I factor out a negative 5, then I end up with the same binomial factor, and that's what I'm looking for. We want it to be the same, otherwise we can't continue. Right? If you made your x correctly, then you'll be able to factor it. Don't force the x though. If there's no two numbers that make it work, you might have a prime polynomial. Okay, so now when we factor out the binomial x minus 8, we're left with x minus 5, and we are done. All right. Now for part D. Part D, when we make our x, we have a product of negative 28. And then when combining like terms, you get a positive 3 as the coefficient. Now, here we go. This minus sign means that you have opposing signs, opposite signs, in order to get a negative when you multiply. So that means this positive 3, when you combine like terms, you really evaluated a difference. So what two numbers have a product of negative 28 and a difference of positive 3? Good, we have negative 4 and a positive 7. So, same steps, x squared minus 4x plus 7x minus 28. So this is how we split up made our middle term into 2. So then we will have, doing our red group and our blue group, we will have x and then x minus 4 plus 7 times quantity x minus 4. We have a common binomial factor of x minus 4. This is how our blue group turned out. This is how our red group turned out. So then, factoring out the x minus 4, we're left with x plus 7. And we're all squared away. How you doing? You hanging in there? All right. Okay, why don't you try part E and see how you do. Pause the movie and give it a shot. Okay, let's make our x for part E. So 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. We have a negative 4 coefficient for our middle term. So again, looking here, the way to make a negative product is a positive times a negative. So that means this middle term is a result of a difference. Awesome. So two numbers that have a product of negative 5 and a difference of negative 4 is going to be, after combining like terms, is going to be negative 5 and positive 1. Negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4. Negative 5 times positive 1 is negative 5. All right, so here we go. This is going to be x squared minus 5x plus 1x minus 5. So this is how I split the middle term. And then having our red group and a green, or blue group rather, we can factor out an x. We're left with x minus 5. And then if we factor out a 1, it's a little bit tricky, we're left with an x minus 5. You got to put something there. So, again, red group, blue group, common binomial factor of x minus 5. So we can factor that out, and we're left with x plus 1. And we're all set. All right. Next up, we've got 3 more. Different variables, don't worry about it. All right, that's fine. So let's, why don't you go ahead and pause the movie and see how you end up doing. Why don't you try F, G, and H and see how you do. All right, let's see how you fared. So overall product is negative 64, middle term of positive 12. I'm looking here. I know I'm going to have opposing signs, which makes the middle term the result of a difference. So two numbers that have a product of negative 64 and a difference of 12 are going to be, let's see what you came up with. I came up with, I think 16, positive 16 and negative 4. Okay, so here we go. Again, rewriting. W squared minus 4w's plus 16w's minus 64. Oh, that's how we changed that 12w. So red group and blue group give us w times w minus 4. And then we can factor out a 16 and we're left with w minus 4. So that gives us a common binomial factor of w minus 4. So we get w minus 4 times w plus 16. How'd you do? I bet you guys did great. And again, this is what we had factored out. All right, next one. Now we have y's in there. So, overall product of positive 5, and then negative 15 as a coefficient for the middle term. So, this plus sign here means that the middle term is a result of a sum of either 2 positives or a sum of 2 negatives. So, the only factors of positive 5 would either be positive 5 and positive 1 or negative 5 and negative 1. Well, that gives you sums of 6 or negative 6. So this is, what do you think? This is, whoops, I don't want to go into that one zone. This is impossible. So that means this is already prime. I bet that one drove you crazy. All right, so now for h, let's see what we have going on. Here's our x, overall product of positive 14, and that negative 9 is the result of a good sum of 2 negatives. So what numbers do we put in here? I think negative 7 and negative 2 work out just fine. So then we will have x squared minus, be careful, 7xy, because xy is our middle term, minus 2xy plus 14y squared. So we changed our middle term into these two. And now red group, blue group. So we get x times x minus 7y. Be careful, see how there's a minus, so we're going to have to factor out a negative 2y, and then we'll be left with x minus 7y. So now we have a common binomial factor of x minus 7y. This was the results of our red group and blue group. So when we factor out our x minus 7y, we're left with x minus 2y, and we are done. Okay, so on to the next. Some polynomials can be factored using more than one method. And this is where it starts to get tricky. Always begin by looking for the greatest common factor and factor it out first. That's the biggest way to make a mistake, because it makes the problems harder to work with if you don't factor that out. If there is one, factor it out. A polynomial is completely factored when it is written as the product of prime polynomials. So now what we're going to start looking for is, can I factor out something from all the terms? So that's how you have to start thinking as you view these problems. So for example, part A. Do you see that we can factor out a 3 from each of them, and we're left with x squared plus 7x plus 12? And so now we do our x. We have an overall product of 12, and we have, when we combine like terms, we have a positive 7. So the two numbers that fit the bill are positive 3 and positive 4. So then we go ahead and we say, okay, that's going to be 3 times x squared plus 3x plus 4x plus 12. So here I rewrote this positive 7x as a sum of 3x and 4x. So now I can factor out, so again, you're on your red group, blue group stuff. And now we can factor out an x, and we're left with x plus 3. And then if I factor out a 4, we're left with x plus 3. So now, again, this was red group, blue group. And we ended up with a common binomial factor of x plus 3. So this 3 continues for the ride. We're factoring out the x plus 3, and we're left with x plus 4. And so this was our common binomial factor. Now, oftentimes I see people do a beautiful job of factoring the x squared plus 7x plus 12, and they forget to include the 3 as a factor as well. So don't forget to do that. Okay? Okay, so now let's take a look at B. And for B, it looks like we can factor out 5y. Okay, and we're left with 4x squared minus x minus 24. Now in coming sections we will be looking at what happens if we have a coefficient other than 1. It turns out that 4x squared minus x minus 24 is prime, So we're actually done. This one was just factoring out the GCF. Okay. Let's take a look at part C. Notice we have a y to the fourth, a y cubed, and a y squared. So I can certainly factor out a y squared, and I'm left with y squared minus 12y plus 35. So, looking at that parentheses, I have an overall product of positive 35, and when I combine like terms, I'll be adding two negatives to get negative 12. So, let's see, I believe that negative 7 and negative 5 fit that bill. So the y squared is going to go along for the ride. I'm going to put the square bracket so we don't have too many parentheses going on. So we'll have y squared minus 7y minus 5y plus 35. Again, we have, this is how we split that middle term. And then we have our red group and our blue group. So we're using all of our wonderful factoring skills. So I can factor out from the red group y, and I'm left with y minus 7. Then I can factor out a minus 5, and I'm left with y minus 7. Be careful of your signs there. And this was the red group and blue group. And notice we ended up with a common factor of y minus 7. So we will get y squared times y minus 7 times y minus 5. Y minus 7 was our common binomial factor. Okay, so for part D, here we go. Notice that a plus b shows up in all of them. Don't forget to put parentheses around. And we're left with an x squared minus 13x's plus 36. Okay. So, you make your x, you would have product of positive 36, and then when you combine like terms you get negative 13, so you're going to have two negatives that add up to negative 13. So we will get a plus b, and then we'll have x squared. Let's see, 9 and 4 I believe fit that bill, right? So negative 9 and negative 4, or the other way around. So minus 9x minus 4x plus 36. And this is how we split our middle term. Here's red group, here's blue group. So the a plus b is going along for the ride. From the red group we can factor out an x. We're left with x minus 9. And then we can factor out a minus 4. And we're left with x minus 9. So this was our red group and our blue group. And we have a common binomial factor of x minus 9. So we will have a plus b times x minus 9 times x minus 4. Here was our common binomial factor from the second part. And we're all set. Awesome. Take a deep breath. So here we go. Let's take a look at this application. First off, we're supposed to factor the polynomial. So negative 16t squared plus 32t plus 48 equals. Now, in order to make it easier to factor, I'm going to go ahead and look at factoring out a negative 16. We'll be left with t squared minus 2t minus 3, right? 3 times 16 is our 48. And then just double check the signs. Okay, now in the parentheses, we've got a product of negative 3, and then we're going to have opposing signs, so we'll have a difference of -2. So the numbers that make that work are going to be -3 and +1. So the -16 goes along for the ride. Rewrite this as t squared minus 3t plus 1t minus 3. So here's how we rewrote the -2t. And then again, got our blue group and our red group. So we will get -16. Factoring out a t, we'll get t minus 3. Factoring out a 1, we'll get t minus 3. Those are tricky sometimes when you got the 1s there. So that was red group, that was blue group. And notice we have a common binomial factor of t minus 3. So we will get -16 times t minus 3 times t plus 1. That was our common binomial factor. Okay, now we're going to take the original polynomial and the factored polynomial and evaluate it at t equals 3. So I'll just put in the middle at t equals 3. This one we had -16 times 3 squared plus 32 times 3 plus 48 is equal to -16 times 9 plus, I believe that'll be 96 plus 48. Right. And I don't want to make up my own math, so let's see. We'll go ahead and grab the calculator so I don't make a little error. And let's see, so 16 times 9 is 144, so -144. And then we can combine 96 and 48 to get 144. Oh, interesting. So it looks like we'll get a result of 0 when t is 3. And then our factored form, -16, and then we get 3 minus 3, and then 3 plus 1. So this will be -16 times 0 times 4, which of course is 0. Did we get the same answer? Yes. Yes. Now what does this answer mean? Right? It means, so let's see what, if you take a look, again this is, you're diving upward from a board that is 48 feet high. So t was in seconds, and you're talking about height above the water. So it's a cool kind of parabolic arc. And this is a good time. It's summertime, so the people are going in their swimming pools. So what this means is after 3 seconds, you make contact with the water. All right. And guess what? That's it for this lesson. Have a wonderful day, and we will be getting into some crazy stuff. Make sure you do the 6.1 and 2 homework before you start the 6.3 lecture. Otherwise, it'll be hard for you to understand it. All right, things start getting a wee bit more complicated. So have a wonderful day, and make sure you get your homework all done. Bye.